Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, Season 3, Episode 22. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm the Food Professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Or I guess I should say, benvenuto. Greetings from Barcelona. I'm here in Barcelona today. I'm hobnobbing with the retail elite and the digerati from across Europe for a few days at an event called the World Retail Congress, along with my remarkable retail podcast, Steve Dennis.
And how's the weather like right now?
The weather is very nice. It is in mid-20s. It is perfect weather. The grass is green. Have you ever been to Spain? Have you been to Spain? Have you been to Barcelona? Have you been to Spain?
Oh yeah, actually, the first time I visited Barcelona was before they hosted the Olympics in 1992. Okay. So it's been a while, and I actually came back. I went back there. I think it was 10 years later. It's just a beautiful city.
Beautiful city.
It has changed quite a bit.
Our very special guest on this episode is Colleen Martin, Chief Revenue Officer, Caddle. And we have a real treat for everyone. A custom study commissioned by the lab released today all about plant-based foods and beverages and the latest consumer insights. We talk about this a lot, so it's great to have some data, and we'll get to our interview with Colleen later, but there's some really interesting nuggets of data and that I found that I think even took you by surprise a little bit, yeah? Yeah,
a little bit. And in fact, actually, it's going to be confirmed later this week, but I'll be invited to do a seminar with Plant-Based Foods Canada about this study. And so, results are really, really interesting. So I'm looking forward to our conversation with Colleen.
Well, and you and I, reminder to everyone, you and I will be together in person again pretty soon, actually right around the corner. We were talking off mic. It's really coming quick. The CL Food Innovation Show in Toronto, May 9th to 11th. We're the official podcast of the show. Be sure and stop by the podcast studio, say hi, and do not miss that show. All right, let's jump into the news. So in our last episode, we were talking about a little bit, not too much, about the PSAC strike, the civil servant strike, and what were the implications for agri-food industry. Well, it's happened, so it's probably one of the biggest labor stoppages, biggest labor strikes in many, many years. So any further insights now that it's a real thing around the implications for agri-food and the agri-food industry?
Well, I don't know about you, Michael, but I think this strike is far from over. I mean, there's first of all, we have a minority government. I don't think that Ottawa will actually legislate a go back to work scenario. I don't think, and so
they have been historically a pro-labor government, reluctant to jump in. So and any government's not going to jump in day two. I mean, they're going to let the process, though the process has been going on for years here, right? I mean, they
haven't had a contract in 3 years, I believe. So it's been a while. Of course, I always look at agri-food and see how the labor dispute is impacting the agri-food sector. In fact, about 3,000 employees who actually work in the agri-food sector are on strike right now. And that impacts programs like Agri-Invest, Agri-Stability. All of these risk management programs for farmers are being impacted. So it's a big deal. Now, in April, it's not that big of a deal. The busiest season, of course, is later in the year, but still, farmers need to talk to these people, and they're not around. So that's going to be impacting farming. We're hearing stories about ports being impacted, airports. Obviously, when you're selling commodities, if logistics are impacted, that's going to be a problem. And lastly, employees. I mean, foreign workers, immigration is being impacted. So how many of them haven't arrived to Canada to help farmers? We don't know. I think there's a significant number who have arrived already, but not all. So that's something that we're watching very closely for farmers. And lastly, a lot of people are concerned about the CFIA. The CFIA is actually not on strike right now. So if you're concerned about food safety,
we're in good shape.
That's right. We're in good shape. There's almost 4,000 inspectors out there. And so the numbers are quite significant, but they are negotiating right now. But they're not part of this current labor dispute. So you don't have to worry about the safety of our food in general.
Oh, I meant to ask you, how did you feel after you had those best before past date ribs that I served you last week? Everything okay? Did you survive the rib experience?
I made it to the stage for our food safety conference. I mean, it's quite risque for you to feed me something like this on the eve of a keynote at a food safety summit. But I actually did tell you while you were graciously hosting me at your house that I actually fell ill on the eve of a conference, of a talk I was giving at a food safety conference. So I didn't want it to happen again. That's for sure. But it was such a delicious
thank you.
meal.
Yeah,
so even if I would have been sick, it would have been worth
it. You're too much. Let's talk about food inflation numbers. They're out for March. What's your impression? Up, down, sideways? Any surprises?
Bad news, it's still high. The numbers are pretty high still. The gap between inflation and food inflation is increasing. It's now at 4.6%, highest it's been since 2009. That's a problem. So it means that people will continue to be sticker shocked. But the good news, of course, is that the food inflation rate is dropping. And so when food inflation drops, it means that the market is more predictable for our grocers. So we are expecting things to be friendlier for consumers. So that's a good thing. But it was a couple of things that I was looking at this morning. BC's month-to-month increase is minus 0.8%. So prices are actually, they're lower than last year.
Wow.
Which is interesting. Well, lower than in February compared to February.
Oh, this is month over month, is it?
Yeah, so a lot of people look year to year, but I look month to month to see momentum. And now, BC's, you can feel that in BC, things are really slowing down. Whereas in PI, it's almost at +2. It's at plus 1.7, 1.8%. The Maritimes, the Atlantic, again, month-to-month increases are over 1%, which is significant. But in Ontario, where you are, usually, and Quebec, it's at plus 0.3%. So you can see that, yes, prices are actually going up, but not as quickly as before, which again is good news.
I wanted to talk about this fascinating article in the New Republic about the battle between big ag and lab grown or cultivated meat. And I wanted to get your opinions on it. You may or may not have read the article, but basically you would understand that there's large lobbying groups on both sides of this discussion, right? So, like I think, who is it? Tyson alone in the U.S. spends like almost $2 million in lobbying. And the article talked about our friend Josh Tetrick, who's been on the show at Eat Just, banding together with other folks who are doing similar work. And you could see the fight that is on. In fact, one
rivalry,
state, it's also the legislative rivalry. So they were saying in the article, one state, I think it was Alabama, has declared that you can't call it meat if it didn't come from a live critter, like an animal.
Or carcass or
whatever, right? So I find this just so interesting because we're just at the very beginning, and you and I have talked about it a couple of times, and it's related to plant-based very, very closely. It's a different flavor, so to speak. What do you think? I mean, it's got to be this epic battle coming for the future, right? Between what is meat and what do we call it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, as you know, Michael, in dairy, we've been in this battle for quite some time in Canada because
Don't call it milk. Don't call it milk. It's not milk.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, and of course, the margarine debacle we've seen for many years, that was epic in Canada. So it's been resolved thanks to Unilever. But essentially, on the meat side of things, we're just at the beginning. I think there is a battle, absolutely, and frankly, I think that the traditional sectors supporting the meat trifecta feel threatened, and that's why we're hearing a lot of plant-based bashing, which to me is a little silly because again, our numbers show that consumers really enjoy these products. They enjoy eggs, they enjoy dairy, they enjoy beef, pork, chicken.
Sure.
But at the same time, consumers are more curious, and I know that Colleen will raise the issue of health and the environment. And people are concerned about certain things, and they're adjusting, and they're not letting go of some of these staples, but they're looking around, and which is nothing wrong. I mean, this stomach share mentality is, to me, so 1990. I mean, it's just we've passed that. I think it's more about offering choices to consumers to amplify or provide credibility to classics, essentially, like beef and pork. And so instead of just playing with the linguistics or labels in particular, I mean, consumers, when I see these headlines, I don't know about how you feel about that, but when I see these kinds of headlines, it makes me feel that some companies think that consumers are just plain idiots.
Well, it's interesting because I can actually see the argument to not call oat milk, but it's far more interesting when you're talking about raising protein in a lab versus in a field. I mean, it page back to the way Josh Tetrick explained it, right? We're both feeding ingredients. So I think it's a much more super interesting thing. I'm going to keep my close eye on it. I'm sure you will as well.
I think the most important thing, and I've said that actually on the weekend when I was giving my talk on proteins in New Brunswick, is transparency is non-negotiable anymore. We've made a mistake with genetically modified organisms, GMOs, with genetic engineering. Forever, industry was obsessed with the idea that people will be fearful of the technology. Let's allow people to befriend the technology and label the crap out of these products. And that would include cultivated meat. I actually think that just label the stuff and let consumers decide.
Yep. Let's get a bit wonky. That's not wokey. That's wonky. Let's talk about Bill C-282, an Act to amend the Department of Foreign Affairs Trade and Development Act. And now you're telling me off mic it's going to exclude supply management companies from any future trade deals. Unpack this for us less wonky or wokey or whatever, less legislatively oriented understanding of what's going on here.
Yeah, it's a pretty simple bill. I mean, the bill would force any governments to not put supply management on the table while negotiating trade deals, essentially. Okay. As we saw with CETA and other deals in recent years, governments actually breach supply management. We are allowing more products into our market, and supply management is not designed to do that because quotas are set based on domestic demand. So as soon as you allow more products into the market, it just, like you said, it makes the whole system wonky. And I actually had a good chat with some lobby groups. I won't tell you which ones, but they were concerned that there was a lot of political support for this, and I'm not surprised. Like, why, as an MP, would you vote against this? Like, seriously. But so we're into the third reading in Parliament for 282, and for the second reading, 24 MPs voted against, and I was shocked. This is going to come back and bite them, to be honest. And these 24 are conservative MPs from out west, where dairy, of course, is not that important. But to me, as an MP, I would never vote against this bill, ever. And guess what? Once a new government comes in, do you think you cannot change a law when you're negotiating with China or with another party? I mean, essentially, negotiations are all about changing rules. So this is more symbolism than anything else, in my view.
You said something interesting there, so are you ever going to run for Parliament?
No.
Any ambitions for political office?
No, actually, I was hanging out with some politicians. Actually, I did a couple of panels on the weekend with politicians in New Brunswick, and I have no interest, zero. I've been asked before. I've been asked a few times. I won't tell you from which party, but I have no interest. I have a lot of respect for politicians, to be honest. It's a tough job. You have to care about everything, even though you don't, and you have to listen. even though people don't listen to you.
No,
It's you got to be. Yeah. I mean, you came from Ottawa. I mean, you know that politics
it's a hard life. It's a hard life.
It's a hard life. Absolutely,
it's a hard life. Well, all right. So I'll say no, not never to our new Minister of Agriculture. There we go. Our new Minister of Food. All right. Well, let's get to our excellent interview with Colleen Martin and hear all about what consumers are thinking about plant-based alternatives and plant-based products from someone with her hand on the pulse of Canadians each and every week. So let's listen to Colleen now.
All right. Today we have a special guest joining us today. In fact, I don't know why we didn't invite her a long time ago, but now she has the time. Yeah, no kidding.
I'm just so busy.
Yeah, exactly. So we have with us today Colleen Martin, the highly talented, energetic Colleen Martin, the Chief Revenue Officer at Caddle. Welcome, Colleen.
Yes, thanks for the invite, guys. It's a pleasure. You are two of my favorite people, and I love chatting about anything with you. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
You've done a lot in your career. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself without taking like an hour? We just have 15 minutes.
And we only have 25 minutes, guys. So
yeah, exactly. So tell us, tell our listeners who you are, what you're all about, what's your role at Caddle.
I started my retail career in the late 90s on the floor at Home Depot, serving customers, understanding where their friction pain points have been. From there, I learned and started working with a brand at a barbecue manufacturer in Canada. I worked there for 3 years in various roles, just understanding that kind of the law of physics and how it applies to a brand. And then from there, I went into Canadian Tire and Home Depot as a buyer for many years, managing large P&Ls of seasonal categories, and really became addicted to that a seasonal pattern of putting out products and measuring, seeing what my consumers thought, and then iterated for future line reviews and future seasons. And then I started the amount of hours I was working. I was like, why don't I just start my own company? So I left Home Depot and started my own consultancy, and I did that for 12 years, working with brands and retailers, helping leverage category management principles to grow their business profitably and collaboratively with their retail and brand partners, because we truly are stronger when we work together as a team. And from there, COVID destroyed everything, and all of all of my contracts said, "Okay, we'll talk to you when this is over in a couple of weeks." And so they paused everything. And at the time, I was advising Caddle as a strategic advisor, and Ransom Holly.
So you were already working with Caddle before you joined.
Yeah, I was meeting with them once a month, just vetting through their strategies, giving them my retail kind of expertise, if you can call it that. I guess it's just, I'm old, so I've been doing this for 25 years. But like just my perspective on what will work and what won't work with brands and retailers. And so Ransom said, come work with us full time. We need your help really scaling this company. And I believed in it fully because it's truly a democratization of data and access to targeted consumers, much more like obviously faster and more economical and budget friendly, we call it, for brands and retailers. And since I joined in June 2020, we've doubled the size of the company. We've partnered with pretty much every major brand and retailer in Canada. So it's been a really fun journey.
That's right. And in your spare time, I understand you're a triathlete, correct?
Well, yeah, I guess I'm not professional, but I am currently training for an Ironman, and that has definitely helped. No big deal. It's only 20 hours a week.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's been a really eye-opening experience in terms of what we're talking about today, in terms of nutrition and health, and that's been a really transformational journey over that last couple of years.
And you also live on a farm in Ontario, which is great. So you kind of see both ends of the food continuum in a way.
I do. We do have a little plug for my pick your own blueberry farm in Coketown, Ontario. We're open mid-July to mid-August, and come on out and pick some blueberries.
That's great. So talk to us about Caddle specifically. We've seen Caddle in the news quite a bit. You're in the Toronto Star today once again with our lab, of course, publishing our latest report on plant-based products. Tell us more about how Caddle actually works.
We are a mobile-first panel of Canadian consumers who we pay small amounts of cash to engage with content from brands and retailers. It's all the way from leaving ratings and reviews for products that we've asked you to go to a store and purchase and try, or identified on a recent receipt from any of the grocers in Canada. Or it could go all the way to, doing a 30 to 50 question survey across multiple surveys on your usage and attitude of a certain category. Insert category here. We have that ability to gather those very specific, statistically significant target audiences because of the daily activity levels and the diversity. We do have Canada's largest panel. We have about 100,000 monthly actives, 10 to 15,000 daily actives. And because of that size and scope, we can amass very niche targeted audiences very quickly for our clients. For example, in the Alc Bev segment, we gathered a statistically relevant sample of Southeast Asian males who prefer whiskey as their primary alcohol, and we did that in less than 24 hours.
Wow.
So that's really gives it's about as specific as it gets, guys.
Left-handed or right-handed, I guess.
Work with, we could have put that filter on there, Michael, but maybe I don't think it would have been directional.
Small select size. Yeah.
Well, with whiskey, you want to know if it's right-handed or left-handed. It helps.
I guess.
That's great. So consumers, brands can benefit from your services. That's great. And so you've been in business for how long now?
About almost 8 years now. Ransom founded the company after he left SC Johnson because he was just frustrated with how much research costed. I've been working with consumer research my whole career. And when I first met Ransom and saw the product market fit and the value proposition for brands and retailers, I was like, I am in, because this is just giving us the ability to, rather than doing this huge study for 100 grand once every 3 years, you can do targeted studies, small studies at, more frequent increments, and really get an agile perspective on what your consumer is doing. Especially like through COVID, we exploded because everyone wanted to know every single week what was happening with brand promiscuity. People went to Walmart in droves, Costco in droves, millennials went to Shoppers Drug Mart in droves because of COVID and what it was forcing them to make decisions on. It's such an awesome and powerful data set to sit on top of, and it gives me a lot of perspective on what's happening in the market.
So you see a lot of data, Colleen. I mean, your hand is firmly on the pulse of Canadians. I love as you're describing kind of the breadth, and you've given us example of the specificity. As you step back and kind of widen the lens or widen the aperture, what are the key trends and challenges that food brands are facing today? From, again, you work with a lot of clients, so you'd have this beautiful overview of the data as it kind of washes across your desk. What stands out to you as some of the key trends and challenges?
I don't even know where to start, Michael. I have been in retail for a very long time, and I have never been, every time something happens, I'm like, this is unprecedented. This is unprecedented. But right now, when we're post-COVID, we thought everything would, quote unquote, go back to normal. And now we're seeing inflation. Now we're seeing consumer trust. Now we're seeing, levels of anger and frustration in store, where you've got people putting signage up saying, please be nice to our employees. This is something that I've never witnessed before. And the work we're doing with brands really is showing that inflation is really compromised the trust of the consumer. You look at greenwashing and shrinkflation and confusing claims, and the poor experience in store in terms of out of stocks or cleanliness based on labor not being, sufficient to manage the size of business and volume that some of these stores are doing. It's leading to this unprecedented brand promiscuity. So you've got channel shifting, going from like a traditional grocery channel into a discount, and now even into dollar store channel, to really search for better value. And they're having to give up experience for that.
I was going to say, I guess for the retailer and brands, there's both opportunity and risk there, right? So, in a market that has stayed without much channel shift, without much share moving from one brand to another, I guess on the positive side and the upside, it means you can innovate and actually take meaningful share in an environment like this. Would you, like we were talking to Midday Squares a couple of weeks ago, the Founders Midday Squares, kind of a better for you chocolate product that has just had phenomenal success. And I wonder if it's a great product, but I wonder if there's some point in time there where consumers are just more open to trying new things, or what do you think?
I 100% agree. I think I like Midday Squares. I use Midday Squares as a training, for training, not for pleasure. But I think that there's so much promiscuity happening in terms of shifting, of trying of new things, that this is where those next brands really get discovered. And it's those authentic brands that will be rewarded with any type of scale going forward. And I think when you look at private labels, there is a ton, and we're doing a presentation at Store about this, and the data is so juicy. Consumers are now trying private label brands where they would not before, and they're using ratings, reviews, and user-generated content to really help them validate whether or not this is something that they would really want to try. And it's now consumers helping consumers. And it's really interesting how this is changing. And loyalty programs will definitely be one of those levers that retailers can pull in order to continue, to retain those people that are changing products, brands quickly. And it's going to be really interesting to watch this play out over the next year, 2 years.
Let's jump off these points and pick up the momentum around newness. You got a new report on plant-based demand in Canada coming out today in cooperation with Dalhousie Agri-Food Analytics Lab. Take us through some of the findings, some of the insights. It's a great report because it kind of looks at both food and beverages. But at a high level, what did you notice? What jumped out at you?
I would love to continue to run this, and I think we will. But I was initially surprised at the adoption rate of the consumer who's consuming more weekly or better. I think from a high level meat alternatives, we asked consumers, how often do you consume? If you consume, how often? And 34% of respondents have consumed meat alternatives in the past 12 months. 31% of those at least once a week, and 8.2% daily. That's a big number. I would have thought that would have been close to nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, in terms of the over-index on that 31%, Nova Scotia, BC, New Brunswick are over that number. I also would not have thought those are the three provinces that be over-indexing. But there are a lot of things at play here. When we go down to the highlights for dairy, this is obviously a category that has been in the market longer.
Yep.
And there are more alternatives. There's a higher amount of products, like a greater assortment of products that consumers can choose from in multiple categories: cheese, milks, things like that. 42.2% of respondents have consumed these dairy alternatives in the past 12 months. And shockingly for me, 50.4% at least once a week, and almost 20% daily. So that means there's complete replacement. And we'll talk a little bit about my speculation there based on, aggregation of other proprietary data we've run, but some high level trends of that.
Yeah.
We also asked what motivated Canadians to buy plant-based alternative products, and 30.7% chose health benefits as their primary reason. Personal taste was selected by about 12.6%. Environmental benefits, this is led by Gen Z at 12.1%, and 8.9% of respondents choose these products for animal welfare concerns. And as for taste, as we round out the highlights, 33.8% of respondents consider plant-based products to taste good. Meanwhile, almost 40% of respondents believe the plant-based alternatives to offer high nutritional value. So there's a lot of, like, a critical amount of consumers, a substantial amount of consumers see the value in these categories. It's battling the stigma that will determine its longevity.
So, Van, I just want to jump in here because I wanted to bounce the idea off you that, and we've talked about it before in the pod, that as the prices for plant-based were all over the map, really, in some ways, particularly the plant-based proteins. And it seems to be that as inflation has dinged the other trifecta of animal proteins, that maybe there's a parity here. Do you think that has a role to play in the adoption of plant-based proteins?
I'm not sure we're there yet. I mean, with cattle, obviously we're measuring perceptions, and the perception is still there. It is still seen as a more expensive category. I agree with Colleen. I was, to be honest, I was a little bit surprised of how robust demand for these products is. I mean, clearly there is a market for these products, given that there's a lot of noise around plant-based bashing, let's be honest here, on social media, but clearly Canadians are paying attention. The one result that really caught my attention, which is a bright spot for any company in this space, is the fact that more than 48% of Canadians actually are seeing the quality of plant-based products as improving. And so there is a legacy. I mean, the Beyond Meat invasion started 5 years ago. And frankly, I think it was a bit of a false start because they came in trying to replace something which cannot be replaceable, like beef and pork. Canadians love these products. So 5 years later, I think there is this recognition that the plant-based space or movement, if you will, or the vegetable protein movement is trying to offer something unique and different, and it's not trying to replace something.
A last question for me, and then I'll pass the mic back to Sylvain, so to speak, is Colleen, based on your findings, what do you think the future of plant-based categories are per se? Is this a moment in time, or is this now got this momentum that is unstoppable? I mean, Sylvain just kind of basically told us he thinks it's really good news for those in the category. But do you see from all the data you look at that this is a moment in time, or is this a one of those tipping points?
Yeah, this is not going away by any means. I'll speak from personal experience of eliminating animal-based products. Full disclosure, I am plant-based, but I'm also processed food. I do not eat processed food. So I think as herd health deteriorates and the population ages, you're going to see the almost exponential increase of more plants in diets, whether or not that should be ultra-processed food, like meat and dairy replacements. Will fill that demand. It'll all depend on ingredients and in battling that stigma of, quotation, it not being natural. This is the current narrative. And does it really taste, feel, act like that product, right? The sensory replication. And if that's because these habits of burgers and wings and all these things, they're ingrained deeply into us. And we have memories and traditions tied to these products. So, taking someone who's a little bit older and telling them that they can't have a burger anymore because of their LDL, cholesterol in their body, it will be hard. They're going to have to get to the point where their doctor's telling them for them to make change. Whereas Generation Z, they are less ingrained and there's less tradition tied to these types of products. So they're much more willing to make these changes.
So in light of these results, what would be the one recommendation you would make to companies out there trying to sell a plant-based alternative, whether it's a meat product or a dairy alternative? What would be your number one advice to these companies right now?
I have so many things to say to these companies. I think that, number one, get the natural whole ingredients increase that, make it better. Enough with all of these ingredients with X's and Z's. If they focus on authenticity by having, good ingredients, and then also number one pillar is taste, feel, replication of that animal-based product. I think that will be critical. Like, obviously price is an issue right now for consumers, and, the economies of scale. This company's small. They're trying new products, and there's before Impossible became huge, basically led by quick service restaurants like Burger King, etc. They didn't get their consumer product right, which is, there were a lot of mistakes there. But if you allow one channel to drive your growth, then you can slowly and more methodically develop a better product, as seen by, and I know we were talking about this, Sylvain, the seafood companies that are slowly coming to market and doing a much better job at making sure sensory is where it needs to be.
Yep.
So I think that would be number one.
All right. Well, listen, this has been fascinating. And of course, we'll put a link to the study in the show notes, and it's out in the media today. Listeners have probably come across it. But where can we go to learn more about Caddle and about you? Get in touch. Are you a LinkedIn person? Or what's the best way to get in touch?
Any and all. Go to askcaddle.com if you want to reach out with me or someone from my team. LinkedIn, connect with me. Happy to walk anyone through what the right next steps is for them. Having access to your targeted consumer in an agile way is critical to your success. Considering that 80% of new products fail, let's bring that number down by just, understanding what your consumer wants. So any of those ways you can contact me, I'll be happy to help you drive your business.
Fantastic. Well, Colleen, on behalf of Sylvain and myself, you're a familiar name, and certainly you've been doing some amazing work with Sylvain. So it's such a treat to finally have you on the podcast. Again, we shouldn't have waited so long, but here we go. The best time to plant a tree today. So thanks again for being...
That's right.
You see what I did there? Plant trees, Anyway.
Nicely done.
That's
nicely
right.
Done.
The king
nicely
of puns.
Anyway, Colleen, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. Real treat to have you, and wish you continued success, and keep giving us those insights. They're so important.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Take care, Colleen.
I had met Colleen in person, I think, at the last RCC store event, and really great background and such passion for the work she does. So you do a lot of work with her at the Agri-Food Labs, right?
Absolutely. She's
well beyond
amazing.
This study.
I've shared the stage, I think twice or three times with her. It's just great. It's so wonderful. And frankly, I mean, her insights are always brilliant. She reads the data in a different way. She's got a lot of experience. She has worked in the industry for more than 2 decades, and it shows. And I'm more on the research side. I've never worked for a CPG company, but so both her and I, we even though we're pretty much the same age, we look at things a little bit differently for sure.
Yeah, very different perspectives. So anyway, great to have her on, and probably, as we said, long overdue. Now, speaking of plant-based, have you seen the new Oatly website, F-Oatly.com?
I did not. No.
It is launched by Oatly, and it is FCKOatly.com, and it chronicles every bad thing.
FCK Oatly.
So it's missing a U.
Yeah, I can tell.
And it chronicles every bad thing that has ever been said about them and their plant-based beverages. I'll put a link in the show notes. I mean, it circles back to your point you were making just before the interview and all during the interview about transparency. These guys said, okay, we're going to track every single piece of good, bad, or nonsense that's ever been said about us, and we're going to put it on our website so you can go to foatly.com. So there you go.
That's awesome marketing. Great.
Right.
Yeah.
Now
the bad, and the Oatly ugly.
Yeah, it's mostly the bad, by the way. So it's an entertaining read, but it's it's done in the this is ridiculous stuff. But here you go. Here's everything bad that's said about us in the category. All right. Well, listen, that's been a great episode. We got back into guests. We got more guests coming up until cavalcade of great guests coming up until the end of our season. So for now, let's leave it there. I'm Michael Blanc, Consumer Growth Consultant, President of Maven Media, and Barcelona temporary resident for this week. And you are?
I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
All right, everybody. Have a great week. Travel safe. Sylvain, be safe. And look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks at Cial in Toronto.
Take care.